Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we're jumping straight into the key current affairs from June 25th, 2025. This is part 1. Our goal, like always, is to filter out the noise and give you the essential insights, especially if you're preparing for exams, like the UPSC. We've got quite a mix today, financial security, global health, environmental stuff too. And for some of you, a few bits might be a good revision, just locking in that knowledge. For others, it'll be fresh, important info.
Absolutely. And what's really interesting is seeing how these seemingly separate topics, they often connect, don't they? They tie into these bigger national and global pictures. Understanding those connections, that's really key for your analysis.
Okay, let's dive in then. First up, something that really hits close to home for many banking fraud. The RBI, the Reserve Bank of India, their latest annual report flags a pretty alarming trend.
Alarming is the word. The numbers are quite stark.
Yeah. Fraud cases in banking, they've jumped significantly. The total value shot up to, get this, 36,014 crore in FY25. That's up from around 12,230 crore the year before.
That's fantastically. It really is. And it signals, a real challenge in the digital space, a constant battle against more sophisticated fraud.
Exactly. So to fight back, the RBI is working on something called the Digital Payment Intelligence Platform, or DPIP. This is going to be set up as a new digital public infrastructure, a DPI under the RBI's guidance.
And DPIs, just as a quick refresher, they're like foundational systems, right? Like Aadhaar or UPI. Accessible, secure, they support key services.
Precisely. So this DPIP aims to boost how banks manage fraud risk. The idea is better intelligence sharing, using advanced tech, coordinating between banks.
Makes sense. You need that shared picture to spot patterns.
Right. And they've set up a committee headed by Sri A.P. Hota to look into setting it up. The Reserve Bank Innovation Hub, RBIH, is actually building a prototype now, working with, I think, 5 to 10 banks, public and private.
It's a necessary step, given the scale of the fraud we're seeing. And it brings up that wider issue of just how financial crime is evolving. It's not just local fraud either, that same RBI report. It also pointed out some major vulnerabilities globally, specifically around countering proliferation financing.
PF, proliferation financing. Okay, that sounds very serious. What exactly is PF?
It is serious. PF is essentially about raising, moving, or providing funds or resources to people or groups involved in getting weapons of mass destruction, WMDs. So, a massive threat to global security and the financial system itself.
Wow.
And the Financial Action Task Force, the FATF, they just put out a report on this, looking at complex PF schemes and how actors evade sanctions. Some key findings. Well, the current risk environment involves both state and non-state groups trying to get their hands on dual-use goods.
Dual use, meaning they have civilian and military applications.
Exactly, and they're using complex networks to get them. But here's a worrying gap. Only about 16% of countries are actually effective at implementing UN sanctions to stop WMD proliferation.
Only 16%? That's surprisingly low.
It is. And the techniques these illicit actors use are getting smarter. They use intermediaries like front companies, shell companies, financial fixers. They route things through third countries to hide who the stuff is really for.
So layers upon layers of deception.
Precisely. And concealing beneficial ownership, hiding who really owns or controls a company is a big part of it. Digital methods make that even easier and harder to detect.
Right. And they're using crypto too, I imagine.
Oh, absolutely. Virtual assets are a key tool. Using cryptocurrencies, new tech to bypass sanctions, moving funds directly or maybe through countries that aren't fully compliant. Plus, the maritime sector. It's so complex, global shipping. They exploit that using what's called the dark fleet.
The dark fleet. What's that?
Vessels that basically hide their identity or movements, turn off tracking, change names, that sort of thing, makes it really hard to follow the trail. There was actually a case involving India recently, where investigators found misdeclared dual-use gear on a ship heading to Pakistan, a real-world example.
The scale of these operations is just mind-boggling. So what does FATF recommend?
Well, the report pushes for several things. Regularly updating threat assessments because the tactics keep changing. Better information sharing between governments and the private sector, like banks. And interestingly, they want a specific definition of WMD-PF added to the FATF glossary within 5 years to get everyone on the same page. Plus, a global review of how countries assess PF risks within 3 years.
Seems like a solid plan, but implementing it globally, that sounds like the real challenge, especially given that 16% figure. And just a quick reminder, folks linking back to the RBI, remember those existing measures against bank fraud? Things like multi-factor authentication, the zero liability rules in some cases, using those .bank.in or .fin.in domains to spot fakes, those are still crucial. This DPIP builds on that.
It's all interconnected. Financial security, global security.
Okay, let's switch gears now. From financial flows, let's talk about public health and a new push on environmental issues. Two big reports or initiatives here. First, the WHO World Health Organization released its Global Tobacco Epidemic 2025 report.
Right, the 10th one in the series. They track progress based on that WHO Framework Convention on Tobacco Control, the FCTC.
Yeah, and they use those MPOWER measures. That's monitoring tobacco use, protecting people from smoke, offering help to quit.
Warning about dangers, enforcing ad bans, and raising taxes. The 6 pillars.
Exactly. So the good news, there's been progress. Since 2007, 155 countries brought in at least one of these policies. That covers over 6 billion people. The biggest win seems to be those large graphic health warnings on cigarette packs.
Those are hard to miss.
Definitely. And India gets a specific mention for strong measures against tobacco advertising and promotion across all media. Plus, India was actually the first country to apply tobacco control rules specifically to digital streaming content, like Netflix, Amazon Prime Video, etc.
That's quite innovative, addressing the new media landscape.
But there's a but. The report says tobacco taxes are still the least used MPOWER measure globally. And in India specifically, cigarettes are apparently still quite affordable, relatively speaking.
That really highlights that classic tension, doesn't it? Public health goals versus, economic factors like tax revenue and affordability. Maybe taxation is the next big battleground for tobacco control.
Could be. Now, sticking with global efforts, there's news about a new environmental panel, the Intergovernmental Science-Policy Panel on Chemicals, Waste, and Pollution, IPCP.
Yes, this follows on from a UN Environment Assembly resolution back in 2022. UNEP, the UN Environment Program, convened the negotiations and will host it.
And its purpose?
Essentially, to give governments independent, solid scientific advice on chemicals, waste, and pollution. Policy-relevant advice. The next step is getting it running the first big meeting to sort out its work program, priorities, how it partners with others.
What strikes me is how they're positioning it, completing a scientific trifecta.
Exactly. Alongside the IPCC for climate change and IPBES for biodiversity, this new panel focuses on that third major crisis, pollution and waste. It addresses what many now call the triple planetary crisis: climate change, biodiversity loss, and pollution waste. They're all linked.
And the need is clearly there. We use so many more chemicals now, and waste is just piling up.
The stats are sobering. Municipal solid waste projected to go from 2.1 billion tons last year to maybe 3.8 billion by 2050, and modern pollution up by 2/3, 66% in just the last 2 decades.
Wow, so this IPCP panel is a really big deal then, a coordinated global scientific effort to tackle pollution.
It absolutely is, a much-needed focus.
Okay, great. After this deeper dive, let's quickly cover some other important news items that popped up. Think of these as rapid-fire updates, crucial facts for your prep.
Quick takes, let's do it.
First, the impact of conflicts on the environment. Ongoing wars pose huge risks. Potential radioactive leaks, sure, but also massive GHG emissions. Militaries globally account for maybe 5.5% of all emissions.
That's a significant chunk often overlooked.
Yeah, and then there's pollution from destroyed industrial sites, landmines, contaminated soil and water. The cleanup in Ukraine alone is estimated in the tens of billions. Plus resource depletion, biodiversity loss, think Agent Orange in Vietnam. There are international agreements, like the Rome Statute, calling environmental damage a potential war crime. But enforcement is tough.
The grim reality of conflict.
Next, India's launched its first national rare blood donor registry, run by the National Institute of Immunohematology under ICMR. The goal is to connect patients who need frequent transfusions with compatible rare blood donors, people negative for common antigens, like Rhinal or the Bombay blood group.
Vital for those specific patient groups.
Then there's a new term, thirst wave. Basically an extended period of atmospheric thirst, 3 or more days where the air's evaporative demand is super high, above the 90th percentile historically.
Driven by heat, wind, low humidity.
Right. Knowing about these could help farmers manage water better.
Interesting. Practical application there.
The WMO released its State of the Climate in Asia 2024 report. Key takeaway: Asia is warming up fast. Twice the global average rate.
Twice, wow.
Yeah. 2024 was one of the warmest years on record for the continent. Major glacier melt in the Himalayas, record sea surface temps. Concerning signs.
Definitely paints a worrying picture for the region.
Okay, recycled plastic. A new study raises some health flags. Apparently, a single pellet of recycled plastic can contain over 80 different chemicals.
80 in one pellet.
That's what they found. And the worry is these chemicals might leach out, potentially messing with hormone systems or metabolism. It raises questions about the recycling process and safety.
Complicates the recycling is always good narrative. Needs more research, clearly.
Then an oil and gas term, blowout. Context is ONGC dealing with a natural gas leak in Assam. A blowout is basically an uncontrolled release of gas or oil from underground, force up the well, often caused by valve failure or underestimated pressure.
Can lead to massive fires, pollution.
Yeah.
Very dangerous.
Yes. Also in Assam, the Imbobachi Mela is underway. That's the annual fair at the Kamakya Temple. Big event, major Shakti shrine, linked to tantric traditions, fertility, and the monsoon.
A significant cultural and religious gathering.
And finally, place news. Qatar. Iran apparently launched missile attacks targeting the Al Udeid air base there. That's the largest U.S. base in West Asia. Geographically, Qatar is that peninsula bordering Saudi Arabia, with maritime borders near Iran, UAE, Bahrain, mostly flat, no rivers.
Puts it right in a very strategic and tense location.
Phew. Okay, that was quite a roundup. What an incredible amount of essential information we've managed to unpack today. We went from the details of banking fraud, DPIP, global threats like proliferation financing, then shifted to WHO's tobacco report, the new IPCP panel on pollution, and all those quick takes. We really hope this deep dive helps you stay well informed. Remember, truly understanding these current affairs, connecting the dots, that's so crucial for your UPSC journey.
It absolutely is. And if I could leave you with one thought, notice how interconnected everything is. Financial security isn't separate from global stability. Public health isn't separate from environmental health. It really points towards a need for more integrated thinking, doesn't it? How might tackling these issues with a truly comprehensive, multifaceted approach, how might that change the game in addressing the world's complex challenges? Something to mull over.
That's a great point to end on. We really hope this deep dive gave you some valuable insights, maybe a few aha moments. If you found it helpful, do give us a like and definitely subscribe so you don't miss out on future updates. We want to help you stay right on top of all these crucial developments. We'll be back soon with more.